It is believed he won tens of millions of dollars in high-stakes poker matches around the world.
Imagine being a legal rock star who argued more Supreme Court cases than almost anyone alive. But at night, he was risking millions in secret poker games. But the bigger the wins, the bigger the secret. Until January 2025, when his carefully balanced double life exploded in the most brutal federal takedown the legal world has ever seen. Tom Goldstein grew up in a family of law and logic. In high school in Irmo, South Carolina, his talent for reading people and dominating debate led his team to a state title. At the University of North Carolina, he became one of the nation's top college debaters, though his grades suffered and law schools rejected him. Thanks to a relative, he joined American University's evening program, discovered a passion for the Supreme Court, and interned with NPR's Nina Totenberg. By his early 30s, Tom had disrupted elite Supreme Court law, building his own firm, and becoming one of Washington's sharpest legal minds. Now, in the early 2000s, when ESPN began broadcasting poker tournaments, millions of viewers were drawn to the drama of the game. Among them was Tom Goldstein, who, at the time, had never even played a single hand. But what fascinated him wasn't the money or the spectacle. What he saw was something deeper. To Thomas, poker looked like a pure intellectual exercise, a game that perfectly balanced luck, psychology, and calculated risk. It didn't take long before watching turned into playing. Tom didn't stay in casual kitchen table games for long. Before long, he was sitting in underground poker rooms in Washington, D.C. and New York. And these weren't friendly $20 games either. The kind where someone wins a few $100s and everyone laughs it off. The stakes here could swing by $100,000 in a single night. And his style at the table? It was anything but calm. He bluffed relentlessly, shoved massive bets into the middle of the table, and constantly pressured the other players. Half the time, he played like someone who had absolutely nothing to lose. In poker terms, he was the definition of a chip bully, and he embraced that reputation. Everything escalated in 2008 when Tom entered the World Series of Poker in Las Vegas with a $10,000 buy-in. While many players approached the tournament cautiously, Tom played like a man possessed. He fired off massive raises and re-raises, constantly putting pressure on everyone around him. Soon, a crowd formed. It didn't take long before people started noticing. A crowd gathered around the table, drawn in by the chaos he was creating. The session went on, and Thomas didn't finally leave the table until 7 in the morning. That chaotic night brought Goldstein face-to-face with Dan Bilzerian, poker's infamous playboy. During a Wild Hustler magazine stunt, an actress was injured, and Tom defended Bilzerian with a sharp, sarcastic legal response that quickly made waves in poker and legal circles, proving his fearlessness with words as well as with chips. Meanwhile, his poker life continued expanding, and he managed to hide just how deep he had fallen into it. Because many of his clients came from the gambling world, Tom had a convenient explanation for why he traveled so often. He represented poker stars, which meant he had legitimate legal business overseas, including on the Isle of Man. To friends, colleagues, and even his wife, the trip sounded like normal work. In reality, a lot of that time was spent chasing bigger and bigger poker games. But poker demanded something his legal career alone simply couldn't provide: huge amounts of disposable cash. To keep playing at the highest stakes without risking complete financial ruin, Tom secured a $10 million line of credit from billionaire Stuart Resnick, the businessman behind the Palm Wonderful empire. With that financial backing, he could finally enter the ultra-high-stakes world he had been chasing. Then, in 2014, everything changed again. Goldstein met Paul Fua, a mysterious figure widely described as one of the biggest bookmakers in Asia. Fua lived in a globe-trotting world of luxury villas, private jets, and enormous poker games. Their relationship began after the FBI raided Fua's Caesar's Palace villa, suspecting him of running a $400 million illegal World Cup betting operation. Tom took the case and discovered a critical flaw. FBI agents had entered the villa by pretending to be cable television technicians. Tom argued the ruse violated constitutional protections against illegal searches. The court agreed. The case collapsed. That legal victory ended up forging a powerful friendship. Before long, Goldstein was traveling with Pua on private jets to Hong Kong, Manila, and other cities where secret high-stakes poker games unfolded behind closed doors. By that point, Tom Goldstein wasn't just a Supreme Court lawyer anymore. He was living two completely different lives, and with every trip, the stakes kept getting higher. In November 2020, Tom's carefully balanced world was suddenly shaken. Without warning, federal investigators from the IRS and the Department of Justice walked straight into his law office carrying grand jury subpoenas. There was no phone call beforehand and no quiet request for documents. They wanted everything. Tom cooperated immediately, handing over the materials they asked for. Then came the silence. Months passed with no charges and no explanation. He wasn't cleared, but he wasn't arrested either. Instead, he was left in a strange legal limbo, waiting for the moment when the other shoe might finally drop. The timing could not have been worse. Years earlier, Stuart Resnick had given Goldstein a $10 million line of credit to support his high-stakes poker career. But millions of that money were still unpaid, and the debt hadn't magically disappeared. So Tom started looking for what he believed could solve everything in one move: the perfect opponent. One game, one massive win that could wipe the slate clean. By this point, he was already playing in poker games where millions could change hands in a single night. In those circles, he identified a wealthy businessman from the American South who had a reputation for gambling recklessly. The man had deep pockets, but lacked the strategic discipline that elite players relied on. To Tom, the opportunity was obvious. If he could just get the man into a private heads-up match, the winnings could erase his debts and put him firmly back on top. Getting that opportunity was another matter entirely. Wealthy players didn't accept invitations from strangers. Tom spent months trying to get access to the right rooms and the right introductions. His break finally came during a lavish poker gathering at the Beverly Hills home of billionaire Alec Gores. The scene looked more like a Hollywood party than a card game. Movie stars such as Leonardo DiCaprio were sitting at the table, while Al Pacino reportedly lingered nearby just to watch the action. Through a well-connected gambler known as Big Al DeCarolis, Tom secured the invitation he needed: a high-stakes poker trip to Costa Rica, where the Southern businessman would also be playing. Tom understood that poker alone might not be enough to build a connection. The businessman was known for enjoying a flashy lifestyle, so Tom leaned into that image. He flew 4 girlfriends with him to Costa Rica, creating a spectacle that immediately caught the man's attention. The unusual arrangement fascinated the businessman, and exactly as Tom hoped, it opened the door to friendship. From there, the two men began playing regularly. What started as casual games quickly turned into a long-running heads-up rivalry. Tom traveled constantly to meet him, eventually renting an apartment in the businessman's city just to keep the games going. And for a long stretch, Goldstein was winning, often by enormous margins. By early 2023, he had taken roughly $50 million from the Southern opponent. After paying back investors who had funded portions of the matches, Goldstein still walked away with around $15 million in personal profit. The run was so lucrative that he made a dramatic decision. In March 2023, he stepped away from his law practice entirely. Publicly, Tom framed the move as a political statement. He told reporters that the increasingly conservative Supreme Court had made it nearly impossible to achieve meaningful victories for the kinds of clients he once represented. Privately, however, the real reason was simpler. The life of high-stakes poker was proving far more exciting and far more profitable than practicing law. Just as he seemed to be riding the biggest wave of his life, the long-dormant federal investigation suddenly reignited. A veteran prosecutor named Stanley Okla took over the case and immediately intensified the effort. Investigators issued more than 300 subpoenas and questioned dozens of people connected to Tom. The quiet background inquiry had turned into a full-scale federal case. Then, on January 16, 2025, the situation finally exploded into public view. A sweeping 50-page indictment was unsealed, charging Goldstein with 22 criminal counts. For friends who knew of his poker hobby, the news was shocking, not just because of the charges, but the staggering sums involved. Tom's trial began in January 2026 in Greenbelt, Maryland, filled with courtroom tension, as his defense argued the case stemmed from sloppy bookkeeping and honest mistakes rather than criminal intent. Tom even testified, accepting responsibility for the errors while insisting they were far from deliberate fraud. Prosecutors painted a harsher picture, arguing that someone of Tom's experience, arguing before the Supreme Court and teaching at elite universities, could not plausibly misunderstand basic tax rules, highlighting evidence that he misled accountants, lenders, and the IRS while hiding the scale of his gambling. The media reaction was immediate, and the legal world was in shock. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Tom guilty on multiple counts, including tax evasion, filing false loan statements, and preparing inaccurate tax returns. Now he faces the possibility of severe punishment. Tax evasion alone carries a potential 5-year sentence, but the mortgage fraud charges are far more serious, carrying penalties that could reach decades in prison.